A lot of it does come in from Canada, and so we'll end up putting very severe tariffs on that if we have to, because that's the way you want to bolster here, and we can do it here.
Our relationship with the United States will never again be the same as it was.
Breaking tonight, Trump thought wheat was just another pressure point, something he could threaten, tax, and trade like poker chips. What happened next exposed a truth Washington never wanted to admit out loud. America does not control its food power the way it thinks it does. And Canada just proved it without blocking a single shipment. Here's what most people still don't understand. This story is not about wheat disappearing. It's about dependence being revealed. It's about how a quiet decision in Ottawa sent shockwaves through American mills, bakeries, grocery shelves, and kitchen tables. And it's about how Mark Carney answered Trump without shouting, without retaliation, and without blinking. For years, the assumption in Washington was simple. Canada needs the United States more than the United States needs Canada. That belief shaped every threat, every tariff, every demand. Trump leaned into it hard. He demanded concessions. He slapped tariffs. He treated Canadian exports like leverage he could turn on and off. And when wheat came up, he assumed Canada would fold. Because from Trump's point of view, wheat sounded replaceable. Grow it at home, buy it elsewhere, pressure Canada, and move on. But that assumption ignored something basic. Wheat is not just wheat. And supply chains are not switches you flip when politics get messy. Canada supplies the overwhelming majority of wheat imports used by American mills for specific purposes. Not because Americans are generous, not because of habit, because Canadian wheat has qualities American production cannot easily replace. High protein, spring wheat. Durum for pasta. Blending wheat that makes bread rise properly, pasta hold its shape, and factories run on schedule. Entire milling systems in the United States were designed around it over decades. When Trump imposed tariffs, he thought the pain would land north of the border. Instead, it landed exactly where Carney knew it would. Inside American factories. Carney didn't panic. He didn't threaten retaliation. He didn't rush to Washington asking for exemptions. He did something far more unsettling. He treated the United States like just another customer. And then he found new ones. Canada already sold wheat to dozens of countries: Mexico, Asia, North Africa, the Middle East. The difference now was urgency. Trump's tariffs didn't cut Canada off from the world. They pushed Canada to stop prioritizing America. Shipments started moving south through the United States without stopping there. Canadian wheat rolled through American rail lines on its way to Mexico. It showed up in Asian ports. It competed aggressively in markets American exporters had spent years building. Canada didn't block the United States. It simply stopped centering it. And that's when the real damage appeared. American flour mills operate on tight margins. They buy months in advance. They cannot instantly swap wheat varieties without redesigning production. When tariffs hit, costs jumped overnight. Mills faced a choice: pay more or raise prices. They did both. Bakeries paid more. Grocery stores paid more. Consumers paid more. Bread prices crept up. Pasta prices followed. Not because there was no wheat, but because the right wheat suddenly cost more. Tariffs don't disappear. They travel. And in this case, they traveled straight into American kitchens. Trump's team tried to deflect. They blamed suppliers. They blamed markets. Industry groups pushed back immediately. This wasn't gouging. This was math. Add a tariff and someone pays it. In this case, Americans did. Meanwhile, Canadian farmers kept selling, just not as much to the United States. This is the part Washington miscalculated. The United States imports a critical share of specific wheat types from Canada. Canada exports only a portion of its total wheat to the United States. The dependency flows one way more than the other. Trump assumed leverage that didn't exist. Carney understood that food security isn't about headlines, it's about options. If one buyer turns hostile, you don't beg. You diversify. Trade missions accelerated. Deals moved faster. Canada strengthened access to markets that didn't threaten tariffs every election cycle. Buyers who wanted stable supply, predictable rules, and consistent quality stepped forward. And here's the quiet shift most Americans missed. Once supply chains move, they don't snap back easily. Mills redesign contracts. Exporters build relationships. Shipping routes change. Trust moves elsewhere. Trump eventually stopped talking about wheat, not because the problem was solved, because it became politically uncomfortable. Millers complained. Bakers complained. Lawmakers heard from constituents wondering why basic food costs were rising again. There was no victory to announce. Canada didn't reverse course. Because the lesson was already learned. The United States had proven itself unreliable. Carney said something that should have stopped every trade strategist in Washington cold. He said, Canada's strength used to be closeness to America. Now that closeness had become vulnerability. So the strategy had to change. That wasn't rhetoric. That was doctrine. Canada didn't declare war. It declared independence of choice. Wheat was just the clearest example because food touches everyone. You can spin tariffs on steel, you can bury disputes over aluminum, you cannot hide bread prices. Trump gambled that Canada would submit to pressure rather than risk market loss. Carney gambled that Canada could sell elsewhere. Only one of those bets paid off. American farmers watched uneasily as Canadian wheat showed up in markets they relied on. Competition intensified. Prices tightened. The same tariffs meant to protect American interests began undermining them. And this is the deeper story. Trade wars don't just hurt enemies. They reorder habits. They teach partners to plan for life without you. Canada learned it could move wheat, canola, lumber, energy, and minerals without American permission. Not instantly, but steadily. Each threat accelerated the shift. Each insult made diversification feel necessary instead of optional.